It's a great pleasure for me to introduce this man, another doctor, I'm afraid to say, Dr. Anake Goodall. He is, as I mentioned earlier, see the change, heka kano hapai, and what people don't always know about him is he's also a leading green investor, having invested in just about every single success story in New Zealand that's come from green roots. Anake has been there right at the beginning stages. You could call him the scout for green. He has diverse management and governance experience, including holding various executive roles in community-based organisation, an advisor to the government and iwi, and was in the past executive roles he served as Chief Executive Officer of Turunanga o Ngāi Tahu, in such a pivotal time. If any of you know anything about that, and if you don't, you should ask, because Anake was just pivotal to such a major change in that way. Was before responsible for managing all aspects of Ngāi Tahu's treaty settlement process. He is a past chair of the Akina Foundation, chairs of the Hillary Institute of International Leadership, and ECOS. He is also a trustee of the Gift Trust, is an adjunct professor at the UC, and is also a Harkness Fellow. And that's without mentioning Harvard and various other things. The list is equal to Rod in this front. I affectionately but humbly often refer to him as an elder. Because he is a man of wisdom. He hates me saying this. He will be cringing to the side of me right now. But he is the people that we need to look for in terms of our pillars of society. He is the person that brings wisdom. No low bar for you, what you're going to say next, Anake. But I want you all to, I know it's the end of the day, he is our final speaker. He is also chair of Terra Nova Foundation. I want you to do a big welcome to Anake Goodall.
Kia ora tātou. Huri no te whare, huri no te motu, nei rāna mihi o nāku noa, kia koutou e hoa mā, e rangatira mā, e paua mā, huri no anō, tēnā no tātou. Real privilege to be here, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Rose, thank you to all of you for being here, right? We've got so many demands on our attention, we've got so many demands on our time. The opportunity cost for our time is something that I feel there's always other things that could be done, so there are decisions to be made, and you've all made the decision to be here with us, with each other, and for yourself as well, I hope. I hope the day's been good, confronting, provocative, challenging, as well. So just very grateful on behalf of Rose and the Terra Nova board for your support and participation and the conversation. And what a conversation it's been, what a full day. I'm certainly full in all sense of the words. I also I'm going to try a little bit of language which is a little bit unfamiliar for me, so please bear with me. But I did arrive today a little bit, I'll use the word slammed or knocked around, and I just want to name the fact that this, look, it'd be very easy to blame Shamabeel and Dr. Carr for this brutal opening this morning, right? That's slamming. But this is our reality. We're reading it everywhere. Whatever our particular addiction is, whether it's the Twitter feed in my case, or the TV news, which I never watch, or what do we read, we are exposed again and again and again, relentlessly, non-stop, to the place is on fire, right? The place is sinking. We're blown away, blown up. It's all... well, one of the things that it does for me is it desensitises me, right? And it's a real problem. So what's the picture that would be up here that would get your attention? Is it yet another flood of yet another European city with yet more vehicles floating away? How does that even work before your eyes? Would that be the thing that would say, I might take this seriously after this? Or is it, I don't know, a town in Hawaii burns to the ground, and on we go, right? And it's one thing, and a number of you have spoken to it, and Rod, you mentioned this directly as well. What's the bit of the human condition the lizard brain may be, that's obviously very effective. It helps us get through crises, things that are maybe unsurvivable psychologically if we didn't have this capacity to switch off, back off, close down, give ourselves some space to process, to engage, to sense make, and then work out what we're going to do. So I get why that can be very powerful. It does seem that that superpower really gets in the road of us doing things needed to move forward, to get our ways out of tight corners. And I mean, how tight does a corner have to be before there's action? Really intrigues me. And some of us, Limits of Growth is 50 years old. This script that we are living today was written almost word perfectly with less computing technology than is in our pockets, right? So there are no surprises here, but we're half a century into countless, limitless, we've mentioned the PDFs, how many PhDs and studies and bloody conferences talking about sustainability. How many of these things can we jam into our lives? And here we are, and we're following the curve as predicted. So I think this is a really interesting question that worries me, frankly, and it worries me partly because I don't know. So one of the things I don't enjoy, and this speaks, Cheryl, to that wonderful slide you had, I mean, I suspect that we all want some certainty, right? Just tell me it's going to be okay, let me know how I'm going to measure this, how I'm going to understand where I'm going, and now I can relax a bit, at least. I might not like it, but at least I've got something to work with. And so the lack of all of those things, I find, leaves me groundless, and I find that disconcerting. I'd like to think that I'm pretty resilient. I can stare most things in the eye and keep walking through it. This stuff actually rattles me, and I don't enjoy that. And I do wonder about our circumstances and our mental health statistics. And I don't get into the definitions of all those things, and where they start and stop is not my interest. But some of the tension, anxiety, paralysis, the way we hold conversations, or perhaps more importantly, the way we don't hold conversations, seem to me, I suspect, are all bundled up together. And just how to unlock that, I don't understand, I don't have a view on, and I don't enjoy that. So I just wanted to name that, because I carry it. I never talk about it. I certainly don't talk about it in places like this. And I do note all the references, well, the young people are getting a bit stressed. Well, this young person's getting stressed as well, right? Of course, with the younger people, we do another thing, which is say they've got a real problem to sort out, haven't they? It's all on us, bad us, but we can't do it, they will have to. So they were stressed about the issue because they're watching the planet burn around them. And by the way, we just said, no pressure, but you've got to solve it. Well, we're not going to give you the vote, or, because you're obviously underage and not responsible. So as a context, facts are interesting, right? And debates are interesting, and politics are interesting, and commerce matters, and capitalism matters, and resource flows. And somewhere in the heart of it, there's the, Martin referenced humanity in his opening words this morning. We're human animals, we carry these ways of being, these needs, and I'm really interested and completely unsure about where it goes, but where does that play in who we are, where we are, how we are, and what on earth we might do going from here. I've got a classic Anake prepared plan. A little anecdote. Once upon a time I met with Rod Carr at Perry Drysdale's actually, and we haven't discussed about something, and Rod commented on my CV, looks like a random walk. So by way of expectations management, there might be a little bit of random walk. The second point in that anecdote, I really enjoyed the fact that Rod was sitting with Perry Drysdale at the same table today, and that's who we are, right? This is the way this community rolls. We know each other. The people who aren't in the room are about 1 degree of separation away. I think that matters. I think it matters for who we are and how we go now, but also speaks to what we might do together later. Okay. I really appreciate the truth, the clear language in this room today. I would far rather sit here. I'm far more comfortable, interestingly, in my groundless self. I'm far more comfortable sitting in the chair, having Rod line me up down the sights and put this hard data up there. I know what I'm dealing with. I've got some stuff that I can have faith in, I can work with, I can attempt to understand, and I can push it round. And I don't think that we enjoy that. In fact, I think we enjoy it less and less. And that speaks to some of the destabilising effect that I experience is, well, what do I believe anymore? So now we're into false news and all of that. But even worse, I think, there's the intentional overlay of it's not so bad, or don't worry about it, or look over in this other direction because I actually want your vote, but I've got no ideas, so I'm going to talk about potholes. I mean, seriously? I am going to try and watch my language and not be too inappropriate today, but some of the stuff really is an insult to our intelligence, right? It's very easy to be offended by the way these very serious matters that we've been discussing are dismissed, played with, obfuscated, denied, and then used to manipulate us, right? Vote for me, because I'll fix your pothole. You've got to be kidding. So, truth matters. I really respect the straight language in this room, and I really respect relationships and people who've got the capacity for straight language. And of course, we can do it gently, but keeping it real, I think, really matters for our capacity to carry ourselves. Well, speaking of potholes, I'm offended is the word that I'll use. I'm personally offended at the way that some parties scratch the racist scab to say we need to other these other people. Co-governance is bad, brown people are evil. I'm offended, that's my own business, and I might get over myself one day. It worries me. I suspect that at the end of the day, the proverbial day that feels uncomfortably closer than we might like, I suspect at the end of the day, the thing that we've got to work with is relationship capital. And I reckon we unwind that at our risk. Chamberlain mentioned lots of variations on the theme if we've got social contracts and we're there for each other, and put the legalities aside and all of that, we've got it in our hearts to turn up for each other under certain circumstances and help our way through. That has been intentionally eroded by some people for completely irrelevant reasons, in my opinion, but we're all paying a very high price. It's a very dangerous game, in my opinion, and I disrespect it. So now, I'm obviously a fair and even-handed man. Can you imagine the other party who's got such an electoral mandate that they could have forced us all to drive on the other side of the road, right? You could have done anything that is conceivable in the legislative and regulatory sense and can't get out of their own road. No aspiration, won't go anywhere. In the teeth of an election, the brand's tired. I've got every sympathy for what that government has done in the past, but at the very last minute, well, we could pick up dental health off the Greens, who we never respect, never acknowledge, never support. And so this level of cynicism, I don't know, I brought up my grandmothers. I value integrity, I value honesty, I value generosity. This sort of behaviour is not deserving of our support, is my personal opinion. Also, and I'll attempt to do this briefly, but I would say that the current political model, as it is and as we run it, we're not very sophisticated about how we use the machinery we've got. It is no longer fit for purpose, right? We live in such dynamic times, things are moving so fast. We've got this, let's use the language of polycrisis, but the point being that there's so many dimensions that need treatment and attention, and we've got the central organising function is playing 20-year-old playbook, perhaps. It's incentivised to go back to the middle of the bell curve and offend as few people as possible, so it's going to the lowest common denominator, because the reward for doing so is that last 2% that'll flick you into the majority. And this isn't unique to us. It's the UK experience, it's the Australian experience, it's the US experience. But you see what the model does is it rewards people for going backwards in time and replicating the behaviour that's led us to where we are and turning away from forward-facing and exploring solutions that might take us somewhere. So I think that this is now, well, it's stalemated, or it's very stalemate, depending on your view. The people who are aware of the issues, who are speaking truthfully and truth to power, it seems to me, are the smaller parties who are coming up with intelligent, plausible things to experiment with and to learn from, which would seem to me is the only thing we can do, right, is to try a few things intentionally, see how we might inform our policy settings and move again and again and again. So my unashamed bid would be that we should all vote for the small players, give them a mandate to have the maximum leverage with the big people, and force the so-called grown-ups to pay attention to things that matter and accede to doing something useful. So that's my thesis there. Now, there's a problem that I think we all need to own, frankly, and we reward the behaviour that we're getting, right? That's how that behaviour gets there. We put it there. Now, I know how I voted, so I'm just looking around the room. If we're representative, one or two of you have, in my opinion, made suboptimal voting decisions in recent times, and I'm encouraging you to think about what your real values are in the forthcoming election. What do you actually stand for? What is your little... I've got a one-year-old granddaughter, so I'm totally besotted by that metaphor, but what do these young humans who are coming through, what do they need for their future, and who's going to best represent that, irrespective of your particular comfort levels or whether you can buy a third house or not? I think it's a matter about priorities, it's a matter about what you really believe, not playing it safe, not what you've been trained to do, not what your mates... Do we have the courage to say, actually, I think the Māori Party have got the most human policies on offer, and I'm going to go that way, or whichever. I'm not steering anyone in any particular direction, but I think if we're not honest with ourselves and we don't have the courage to follow our own convictions and use our voice, then you can just go straight to we'll get what we've asked for, right? So I do think we need to own it. I don't think I can say it's all of you. I've got to think about me as I go into these situations, and am I prepared to step up and do the things that I genuinely believe to be true, whatever they might be. Right, enough of that. I want to talk about an idea that I think offers the agency stack. So I've just suggested that I think central government's too slow. They're slow followers. We need leadership. If you go the other end of that agency stack, I think in my household is probably where I've got most agency. I'd love to say that that's absolute, but I'm subject to not one, but 3 generations of Naito women who I've got to get past first, and then I'm allowed to do whatever I like. So somewhere in the middle, though, on point, is this thing that we've been talking to various ways. It's the regional lens, right? So the thing where we've got politics because we're humans, so we bring our views, but at a regional level we know each other. We can wrangle about things, we're accountable to each other, we're reasonable, we know that we're going to work it out. So I think that that's not a barrier. We're close enough that we can talk about things, we've got shared frames of reference, we've got things that are more under our control, not subject to what someone in Wellington wants to do, and I'm not begging that function. I have worked in central government, and I really get it, and I really rate the civil service ethic, but that's no good when you need to move fast in a local context with people who are unique to that area and work out, given your assets, given your challenges, given the possibilities, what might we experiment with. The best people to do that, the best place to do that, I think, is in region with people that we know, and we in fact vote into roles in the various organisations. So I do think there's a really interesting thesis emerging here about I've already had a chat with Mark about Committee for Canterbury. Do we need to dust it off? The idea, it's the name, we could revisit, maybe rather than Club of Rome, we could be the Club of Canterbury. But what's the mechanism by which the stakeholders, widely described in this geographically defined region, might sit together and start to find each other and find the common ground to the extent there is any, and work out what the challenges to that conversation might be? I think that's worth exploring. It would have all the obvious players. We could pick on the city councils and Peter and ECAN and the groups and the districts and so on. I want to make a bid. My declaration is that I took on the role of the chair of the Christchurch Foundation recently, following Humphrey's leadership and the establishment of that institution. It's a really interesting question about whether an entity like that could be used to hold a long-run agenda, if you will, be a North Star that doesn't get bumped around by every political election and the short-termism of that. And I'm not against accountability, obviously, with funders and ratepayers, but something that holds the compass that might have endowed capital, but I think offers endowed values, right? So that they're not just being played with by other people. This community decides what those values are, invests in them, and use that to help stabilise or contribute to the stability of a coalition of the willing and interested. I think that's an idea that it would be fun to explore. This sounds a little bit, let's hold hands and sing Kumbaya, right? We'll still do it together and it'll be cool. I actually think that that's true. It's when coalitions come together and work out a way to have a shared, define, create a shared narrative, establish alignment, which I would say is absolutely fundamentally important, then the impossible is just a matter of time, right? And so people say, well, you can't settle treaty claims, Graham. Here's what the hell are you thinking about? No one's ever done it before, so therefore it's impossible. And here's 156 reasons why it'll never work, and so on and so on. And people like Graham and a few others we know were there, and we did the impossible, and the country has been transformed as a result. Will never be the same, for the better, in ways that we can only still imagine, I think. We're good at excuses. This is inconvenient, this is hard, there's no precedent, the policy setting's wrong. Well, that's just part of the challenge, right? That's part of the ask, is to lean into that, work out what the constraints are, how would we remove them. Frankly, if we went into a conversation like this, if it wasn't imperfect, if it wasn't clumsy, if we didn't piss each other off from time to time, we wouldn't be doing the work, right? That is the new frontier, is to go to the unknown, work out what the hell does it mean, what does it look like. Gee, this is a bit messy, but finding your way through that is part of the solution, in my opinion, particularly the connections. And so now I'll reference, from the mud the lotus blooms, right? So out of hardship, out of hard things, out of pressure comes pounamu, if you want to use that metaphor. So I'm not afraid of hard. The fact that it doesn't look perfect or clean or easy up front is not a showstopper at all, and in fact could be an important ingredient in the mix, and it's no reason not to go where we need to go in any event. Okay, so I did think to myself it would be good to be out of here by 6. Maybe I'll spin just a little bit, because it is possible, if you're worried about this stuff, if you take it seriously, and I take probably everything too seriously, so it's, speaking to myself here, it is possible to get into God, this is hard, right? It's really, really hard. Maybe we are screwed. Maybe I just need to wait would someone please turn up and tell me what to do? But I am blessed with a lot of good friends. One of them is Grant Ryan, sitting down the back there in that glorious shirt from Peacock at Akaroa, in fact. Now, so I can sit with Grant on the occasional lunch that we have, and I always very much enjoy and value, and I might complain about this thing's imperfect or whatever, and bloody Grant will look back at you and smile and say, yes, but you see the good thing that happened there and the good thing there, right? The point being that our capacity to frame issues differently is liberating. It's all empowering. You can say you can't deal with treaty issues from however many generations ago, and you can't unscramble the omelette, to use a lovely Oreganism, but a different frame, or here's a different possibility, here's a different way to think about it, here's a different way that we might at least explore the idea. So I think the human capacity to frame is all-powerful. I think, and Cheryl named hope, I think that this is, in a way, the definition of the human essence, right? Or that's why we're here. It works as well. So we can pull ourselves through these existential, must be late in the day, is it? Challenges. Look, a few positive points. Just this is for your benefit, Grant. Thank you. I've got to concede there's good things happening. Look, we've talked about the environment. 4% of philanthropic funds go to the environment. Good. That's not nearly enough. But the point is that this is really up on the stage. The Philanthropy New Zealand conference, talking all over it. It's really getting attention. It's getting momentum. The Gift Trust has got 40% of its distributions going to the environment. There's real awareness going up. Momentum's going up. Capital's starting to flow. Is it going fast enough? Well, never, of course, to the impatient. But things are moving. There's another lens. I'm particularly interested in what you might call impact investing, but how do you use your balance sheet of your organisation to be 100% in service to the mission that you're about, as opposed to, let's say, buying fossil fuel shares and using the dividend to fight malaria, which is a Bill Gates model, right? I don't get why a very intelligent man would get to that conclusion. Anyway, personal interest, again, I've heard for years at these conferences, can't be done, you'll lose returns. We've had the big battle with KiwiSaver funds, so, well, you could do that, but your retirement savings will be lower. We know that's not true, and now you don't have KiwiSaver funds and these nasty things at all, as far as I'm aware, or very far less. Point being that on the stage of Philanthropy New Zealand, you've got people who are now reporting 10% of our significant portfolio is already in impact funds. We've changed our charter because that was in the road, or our constitution. We've talked with the lawyers. We've asked them to stop telling us all the reasons why we can't do things and to start telling us why we can do things and how we go about that. There's a real momentum shift there as well, in the framing, the confidence and the capital starting to flow. So again, I think this is an important indicator. And I'll go back to race relations, right? So Philanthropy New Zealand, community foundations, other organisations I'm aware of putting a lot of effort into, is our board representative? Is it respectful? How are we going about this? What's on the agenda? Now, I think the bicultural place is exactly the place to start, but you very quickly, what about our Pacifica cousins? And what about the large group of ethnic communities that make up New Zealand now? And increasingly will do so. There's a lot of effort going into that space by people under their own agency, nothing to do with a government mandate, yes or no, and they're finding their way there. It's early days, and again, I would like us to go a little faster with the allocation of resources and projects, but the mechanisms by which these decisions will change fundamentally are really starting to engage in my potentially very optimistic opinion. I think it's happening, and I think it's very encouraging to see it coming voluntarily from groups of people out of their own wisdom and experience and leading us to a better place. So I totally agree with action, start. I think agency requires movement. It does for me. There's that wonderful Goethe quote that once you start, the solution starts to turn up itself. It's the act of doing that draws in the, however you want to describe it from your own philosophical point of view, but draws in the energy, the connections, the momentum, the courage, the confidence, and so on. So getting going, finding each other. It'd be really easy to sit here and sort of go, oh, well, look, it's a few last thoughts. We should do this and you should do that and the other. And I can hear James, I don't want to be even more of a should head than I might be already. So I thought I might just look in the mirror, right? I'll just speak to myself, because that's the conversation that matters. It's the only conversation I've actually got jurisdiction over. It's the one I have to own. It's the one I take into the ballot box or the purchasing decision or all the things I do. And again, I want to go back to slightly unusual territory, but the person I see staring back at me is actually is sensitive, is an empath, so I buy into all this, right? I carry this heavily because I'm wired that way. I'm compassionate, but I'm not particularly self-compassionate. So there's a point there. This person needs a hug, right? And this person needs some self-care in demanding times. And so I am interested in that idea about how we think about our role and how we respect who we are and that energy and instinct and how we look after that. And then how do we find each other, right? How do we just keep in touch and know that there's other people there? Because there are the dark moments and you really need to know you've got companions, and it's one of life's great gifts to help other people in their dark moments when they need a hand through the tunnel as well. So I do think there's a really interesting question about where we start these conversations, who we point to when we're talking about who's responsible to do what. There's that idea of, do what you can with what you have where you are. Where you are, back to Tūrangawaewae, right? This place and people in place, and what's our reality, and what might we like to do about it. And we've all got things to bring. How about we bring them? So, look, enough probably. If not us, then who? If not now, when? We've all got these. They're actually very powerful statements if we think about it. What's in the road of me not doing things or putting them off till later? Well, that's back to me looking at the person that stares back from the mirror and owning that conversation. It feels like I am attracted to Buckminster Fuller's framing of to try to increment your way out of any complex problem is a waste of time. What's the construct that would exist that would represent your aspirations? Go and build that anew and forget the old thing, just walk away from it, because it will by definition collapse upon itself. Anyway, okay, so I think we're the people that we've been waiting for, right? We've got a region, we've got the components, the pieces, we know the riddle, we know we've got the answers, we're close enough and tight enough that we know each other, and our institutions can work together should we choose to. And I think it would be very interesting to draw the wagons in a circle and explore whether there's a conversation to be held. I'm not calling it. It might work, it might not. It could take various shapes. That's part of the joy of the uncertain journey, right? So I've got one question. How about it?